Our next speaker is Deputy Smith. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentations. I want to ask some direct questions. The local NUJ branch has a proposal that all salaries are capped at around 200,000. Could you tell us how much could be saved annually if that proposal was implemented?
We'd certainly have to come back to you on that, Deputy. I don't know offhand if that was the case. What that would generate.
Is this the case that the local NUJ branch in RTE have put forward a proposal and voted for it, that all salaries are capped at 200,000? So you must be aware of that, and having been aware of it, would you have worked out the figure that could be saved annually by capping all salaries? I'm not just talking about the top 10 earners, but everybody, probably including yourselves, capped at 200,000. How much could be saved annually?
We'll have to come back to you on that, Deputy, because I suppose that proposal, yes, was put out there. We have been in consultation with our unions and with our staff before that, so we are working on the principles that we had been discussing. So that's where we are at the moment.
Well, it would be very helpful if we could get a costing on that, how much it could actually save.
We can happily come back to you on that.
Please. Another direct question. The proposed moving of Lyric out of Limerick, whether it's going to happen or not, have you estimated how much it would save?
Again, I think it's important to look at all of these changes, if you like, are part of, I suppose, a number of things that would need to happen to stabilise RTE's finances. And just picking out one or the other, while there are numbers attached to some, they're not as clean as maybe that question would suggest. And I think the key thing here is that what we have to do is ensure that we can deliver services to the public more efficiently than we're doing, and that is what is tied up in all of this. So there's a complex, I suppose, set of circumstances at play here. So the Lyric proposed move is part of that, and also I think it's worth bearing in mind that we do have excess capacity in Cork and in Dublin. So part of the thinking there as well was to ensure that that excess capacity could be utilised while preserving the service to the public, while at the same time reducing cost overall. So that's the context of the Limerick discussion, and that's the context of why Lyric is one of those proposals. We've just been hearing.
Ms Forbes, I only have 10 minutes as well, but I just want to put it to you that that would not be an acceptable answer for the staff in Limerick, many of whom have settled and bought homes there on the understanding that this was to be where they worked from. I don't think it's good for the city of Limerick, but I don't think that sort of rambling answer is acceptable when it's just a direct question. There must be some idea how much it would save to move Lyric out of Limerick.
As I say, what we are doing at the moment is we are beginning discussions with staff in Limerick on Friday as to what exactly is at play here. And the exact number, Deputy, will depend on a number of things. Again, I appreciate completely that this is upsetting for staff who are living in Limerick. And this is why we have to have the discussions with them as to what's at stake here.
But to have suggested in the first place, you must have some idea how much it would save you, if anything.
It really depends on the final outcome and what the actual mix would be.
Okay, I'm not getting an answer to that. I want to move on and say to you that the cap that was placed on the level of contribution received from the Department of Social Protection in lieu of the free TV licence, let's call it, comes as part of the household package. It amounted to 5 million reduction in your funding for the first year when the cap was placed and has subsequently risen. Can you or have you calculated how much was lost to RTE by that measure? Because this came up for us as part of another discussion to do with transport, where you find that the full amount of free travel that Dublin Bus and Bus Air and etc. give to the public under the Department of Social Protection does not come back to those companies. Have you calculated how much you've lost as a result of that?
Do you have a number on that? Would the department know that?
Yeah.
We can certainly come back if we don't have it, Deputy.
I'm really surprised these figures are not available to us. Really, really surprised. They're very simple questions, and I would like to get the answer to that, please. Would you agree that the whole subsistence of free TV licence should be reinstated to RTE? The entirety of it?
My understanding
it's certainly
from this is that the
10 million
announcement today
this
will
morning.
actually do that.
Yeah.
So
Not just a once-off, that it'll be reinstated.
Will be reinstated, that's our
on a
understanding.
current
and
basis.
that's Deputy Smith, that is a
Yeah.
per annum figure. So
Yeah.
the 10 million
Yeah.
that's announced today, while I don't have the detail of the calculation of that, I understand that in
Yeah.
relation to the free licences, and will remove the cap that was put in place in 2010 on the free licences and restore it, perhaps not completely, but almost completely.
I don't think it is completely. I've done some figures on it, and I think it falls way short of completely. But I would like an answer on that, please. On the recommendations that were given by this committee.
Yeah, Deputy, but that is probably a matter for the department to come back, in fact, on the calculations there.
You'll get me that. Thanks very much. One of the recommendations from this committee to RTE to help with public broadcasting going forward was to implement or to introduce retransmission fees. So there are companies who enjoy the retransmission of RTE material, a variety of pay TV platforms, including Air, Sky, Virgin Media, Vodafone, etc. Have you done any work on trying to claim the retransmission fees from any of these companies?
Sorry, is this work? Yeah, that requires a change of the law. The current regime under Section 77 of the Broadcasting Act would need to be adjusted to enable us to get fair value for the service we provide to platforms. That change hasn't happened. It's not proposed in the proposed amendments either. We brought forward by the Minister.
And are you lobbying the Minister for it?
We have been for many years, yes.
Right, you'd like to see that happen?
We would.
Right. I think that would be a sensible proposal and would also take the burden off the sort of, I don't know, Ms Forbes, what you refer to when you say Ireland's outdated and inefficient collection system. I'm assuming you favour the revenue collection as Senator McDowell has proposed. I voted against that. I'm not in favour of any more being taken from people by revenue. However, I am in favour of, for example, charges being put on social media platforms who gain hugely from advertising, and on those platforms people can watch RTE content but they pay nothing back. 80% of most advertising is gained by two companies, Google and Facebook. And what would be your response to some form of a taxation on the social media players to fund public broadcasting, which I think all of us here want to back up in favour?
Yeah, Deputy, I mean, the figures are quite, you're right to point out the divergence between the domestic players and the international ones. I mean, an EBU assessment of the market just conducted this year shows that between 2009 and 2018, the growth in digital advertising has gone from about 100 million in 2009 to nearly 600 million this year. All of that is going largely to two companies that are headquartered here, Facebook and Google. So, you know, you're dealing with massive global players who are resident here. Our view is the AVMS directive, which is due to be brought into Irish law by the end of next year, and it facilitates the possibility for Ireland or any member state, for that matter, to introduce a levy system to effectively levy these entities and create an Irish content fund to invest in Irish programming. We would support such a measure. It would create much needed stimulus for. I think it should be a contestable fund, by the way. It's not for RTE. This would be for Irish programme makers and Irish broadcasters of all hues. But there's no doubt that there is an asymmetry at the moment between the amount of money these companies are making here and the relative lack of investment they make in Irish programme.
Just one final question, and I assume by saying that you acknowledge that could plug a big hole in RTE's and public broadcasting finances in general, probably save 200 jobs and save the move of Lyric out of Limerick if we were able to put a tax on the digital media.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a separate question as to how public broadcasting is funded, but as regards the audiovisual sector in Ireland and the investment it needs, this could provide a very substantial stimulus and to support the creation of Irish programming, particularly in those expensive types of programming which are hard to sustain, like drama and animation, both of which have a good track record here but are a start of necessary investment. So. And
lastly, I recently met some of your pensioners at a different level, trying to fight for the reinstatement of public sector pensions in full that were cut in 2008. and those pensioners have not received an increase since 2008. Many of them are living on the breadline, and they would have been key people, researchers, people working in accounts, etc. Is there anything you can see that can be done to reinstate increases in the pensions for your former staff?
I'll have to ask you to be very brief on this.
I think it's an important point, though, around pensioners, because I presume, Deputy Smith, you're referring to the defined benefit scheme, which has been closed to new entrants since the late 80s. And that scheme, in fact, is in surplus. We're fortunate enough the scheme has been well managed by the trustees and by the chair of the defined benefit superannuation scheme. And it passes the minimum funding standard, the long-term valuation, so it is in a relatively good place. We, RTE, as the sponsor, recommended a modest increase for our pensioners. We submitted that recommendation under the regulations of the scheme. Any such increase to our pensioners, we cannot authorise that ourselves. It has to be approved by the Minister.
And the Minister is holding it up?
The request is with the Minister.
Ms. Cronin wants to comment on that briefly. Yeah.
Just to say, in fact, it's approved by the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, and that department has come back with questions. Obviously, they have to be assured that it's in order to pay this increase to pensioners, so we're engaging with them and with RTE on that issue at the
moment. Are you engaging
actually.
with the pensioners?
Well, obviously RTE come with the pension increase, so we engage with RTE, and we've also have met the trustees of that scheme.
We have to move on to Senator Maria Byrne. You're substituting for